we have a very, maybe not unique, but a very special relationship with Liberty Township, of course. And a lot of that is because we are part of Lakota school system. So we are going to start our panelists here, and they're starting to come up on the screen. And I'll introduce them in just a second. But I want to give you a little bit of logistics here. During our presentation, if you have a question, there's a Q&A feature on the right side of your screen. You're going to see 3 tabs at that top right column, and the 3 tabs are chat, participants, and Q&A. If you click on the Q&A portion, you'll be able to type in your question. There is also a couple different ways that you can have a question there. You can type your own question in. However, I have a suggestion. If you look and see that your question is already on the screen, on that column, do me a favor and just click on it, and it will tell me that 2, 3, 4, however many people are interested in that question, and it'll also move it up the question list. So I primed our guests with a couple of subjects. You guys can provide the surprise questions if you want, and then we will just move ahead. I think, let me see if I got that all right, because I kind of paraphrased everything. Now, at the end of our presentation, with any time that we have remaining, we will start to address those questions at the top, and I'll try to be cognizant of the time and try to leave some time for some of those. Unless I see something that's really provocative, really going to put our people on the spot, then I'm going to stick it in there. Okay. Now, if all else fails, use the chat function, and someone behind the scenes will update the Q&A slide. So, with that, let me introduce our panelists, and I've had the pleasure of meeting each of these folks in various degrees. A couple of them I've known for a number of years. One is maybe a little more special to my heart, because I am a Miami alum. Old Miami, new Miami. I won't sing it now, but happy to do it later. Dr. Kathy Bishop-Clark, Associate Provost and Dean for Miami University Regionals. Then we moved to John Graft, Superintendent and CEO for Butler Tech. Thank you, John. And Matt Miller, Lakota Local Schools Superintendent. And not the least, Dr. Monica Posey, President of Cincinnati State. And first thing I'd like to do is say, welcome, glad we're virtual, because you guys probably would be a little bit busier handling some issues on your respective campuses with the weather event that we've had today. And I hope things went well for all your schools. So let's get into our panel. And we're going to start off by giving each of our panelists 2 minutes to give us an overview of the positive events on your respective campuses amid this Black Swan COVID event. So let's go ahead, and Kathy, let's start with you.
Thank you, Rick. And I'm actually setting my timer here, so I won't go over 2 minutes.
I don't have to make ugly sounds.
You don't have to let me know, yeah. So I think we're all living in some really unusual times right now, but even in the midst of it, I love this first question. What's some of the positive things that are happening? One of the things that we have going on at Miami regional campuses is we have a one-time deal. It's a one-time $1,000 scholarship for any student who has over a 3.0, and applies by April 1st. No strings attached, no FAFSA required. Anybody that has over a 3.0 can come and apply by April 1, and if they come to regionals, they automatically have a $1,000 scholarship. This is on top of a tuition that is only $6,300 a year. And I have to remind everybody every time I speak is that when you're finished, you have a Miami University degree. Miami University is Miami University is Miami University. Couple other new degrees that we've had at the regional campuses we've started. We have a couple new business majors. One of them is in hospitality management, one is in sales management, and one is in digital commerce. So those are 3 bachelor's degrees that we've just started. Our nursing program is growing like crazy, and we have expanded our nursing so that we're offering it not just at the regionals, but we now offer our nursing program at Oxford as well. And we have developed 2 new programs. an MSN, Master's in Nursing, especially the nurse practitioner. It's going to be a really needed program right now, and also a doctoral of nursing practitioner. 10 seconds left. We have micro-credentials, which is a way that we can work with you to create customized education. And we have a Work Plus program, which I hope I'll get to say a little bit about later, because it's pretty phenomenal.
Thank you. I think we are going to talk a little bit about business and workforce development.
Great.
John, let's go with you. And I'm going to break my rule because there's a question directed directly at you from Larry Burks, Westchester administrator. When will Butler Tech start offering forging classes? You know, forging, hammers, metal, heat, fire.
Well, I guess it's something I can talk to Larry about. Maybe he can, if he has some expertise in that area, if he can give us an insight about how that might apply to some classrooms. We can provide him the opportunity to do a 5th-day experience with some of our students to seek some interest in endeavor, whether they want to do that or not. So
here you go.
I am also, Kathy, putting my 2 minutes on the clock, but I'm going to take just a minute to first thank you, Rick, for giving us the opportunity to share a little bit about what's happening on our campuses and in our organizations. Thank you to the Chamber for the opportunity. And then I want to say just a special thank you to Dr. Kathy Bishop-Clark. I know we've done these round robin sessions of sharing all the great things that are happening in our various organizations. And I know Dr. Clark is going to go back to the classroom, I believe, maybe sometime soon. And but you will certainly be missed. Your leadership was great. The regionals have prospered as a result of that. So I just want to say thank you. And I'm okay giving up some of my time just to share kudos to you.
Thank you, John.
I would say that it has been a trying year, but at the same time, I think it's been a remarkable year when it comes to the connections that we've made across multiple organizations. I know that Mr. Miller and I were in conversations along with all of our colleagues during this time of the pandemic about how we were going to problem solve and basically triage some of the things that were happening during the pandemic. So the fact that we were able to open our adult education campuses in May of 2020 and that we opened our secondary campuses in August of 2020, it's a testimony to our teachers and our staff and all of the remarkable business partners and people that we had within our community helping us open our campuses. We did go to a hybrid model. We have found that the hybrid model has been a great way of providing students continued experiential learning while at the same time maintaining that social distancing. So look forward to sharing a lot of the good things that are happening at Butler Tech and talking about our partnerships that we have with people on the call today.
Thanks, John. Monica.
All right, great. Thank you. Thank you. So glad to be here. Cincinnati State's mission is access, opportunity, and support. And I'm so pleased that despite COVID, we are still focused on our mission and our legacy of great partnerships with employers, our co-op program, our internships and experiential learning. All of these are still going on, although we had to switch pretty quick to the virtual world. We have about 70% of our classes online, but we do have allied health and some of the other lab-based courses in engineering on campus. It's gone well. I think what stands out most is that we've found new ways to help students. We are doing more to make sure they have the technology that they need, whether it's computers, internet access, other types of support. And we've expanded our ability to help provide emergency funds, rent, food, all kinds of things to make students successful. We did it a little bit before, but now we have more donors, more financial support. We've leveraged federal support, and we're just doing more, helping more people be successful. And that's the best thing I can report.
Great. Thank you so much, Monica. Matt?
Thanks, Rick. My name is Matt Miller from Lakota Schools. I, first of all, want to thank Joe and the Chamber for giving us this platform. John Graff and I were talking in one of the tables before we got started in the big group that I'm pretty sure this panel was the last in-person panel that the chamber had, or event that the chamber had. If not the last one, we were pretty close. So a lot has changed, obviously, in that year. I think, and I love this question too, I think that one of the positives, probably the biggest positive I can share about Lakota schools and our kids and our teachers, is that we've been able to offer in-person learning for our students since the middle of August, 5 days a week. So while I'm a huge proponent of technology and online platforms, I still think that in most cases, not all, but in a lot of cases, in-person relationship building and peer-to-peer collaboration works best in an in-person format. So I'm thankful for that. I'm also thankful that our district was able to pivot and offer a virtual learning option for our families who either felt unsafe, or maybe they had somebody at home that was compromised, or just that was a better choice for them. And we do have certainly a segment of our student population that thrives in that online learning platform. And then sort of what Dr. Posey said too, another positive would be the technology. We've been infusing more technology the last couple of years in Lakota with our one-to-one devices. We're actually going to be one-to-one K-12 here, I think, fairly soon. And certainly that'll help. And our kids have grown up with that, and they were sort of born into the tech world. I think the pandemic has maybe, for lack of a better term, forced some of our staff members to get right with technology, so to speak, and to use it and utilize it. And so we're learning and growing in that regard every single day. Another positive would be from the district side, it also kind of goes into the county and townships, would be we were able to offer vaccines for the first round for our staff last week. We have the second round happening in 2 weeks from tomorrow. And we also were able to partner with the Butler County Sheriff's Department and Westchester Police Department and SWAT teams to get them vaccinated as well. So the other good thing would be that we are partnering with UC Health to be a site for vaccination for our community. And those will be at East or East Freshman, maybe next week at the earliest. I'm waiting on a call from them to see if they got their doses. So there'll be more information coming out from UC Health, but we're glad to partner with them and to be a site for our community.
All right. Thank you, Matt. John, I think Matt took some of your time. All right. Well, let's, what I'd like to know is the lessons that you have learned over this COVID experience since last March. What do you think would help businesses? You got any hints for business in what you have learned? And let's just keep that same round table. Kathy, go ahead.
I think some of the things that we've learned is that, first of all, we had so many things that we couldn't do before technology. You know, we couldn't have a meeting on all of our campuses at one time with technology, but then somehow overnight with COVID, we could have that meeting. We couldn't do online and evening advising virtually, but we've learned that online and evening advising, working with students one-on-one, actually works better. More students come and see you. So when I translate that to businesses, you know, what does that mean for businesses? I think some of it is some of it holds, like a student it's intimidating for a student to walk into a faculty member's office and have a one-on-one conversation with them. It's not as intimidating when you do it through technology. We're finding it's less intimidating. So I imagine the same kind of thing happens with businesses. And sometimes there are circumstances when somebody at a pretty high level wants to talk to somebody at a different level. And those conversations we've learned can be pretty darn effective if you use technology. So I think some of what we learned is that we could do things that we didn't think we could do, or we didn't think were well suited for technology. And I think we'll get into this a little later, but I think education is going to be transformed by this pandemic, and I think business will be the same.
Okay, John, what do you think?
Yeah, thanks, Rick. First, I would say that the greatest test of your culture is during a crisis. Mm-hmm. And more times than not, organizations that respond very well had a healthy culture, and they were tapping into their collective thought leaders within the organization and outside of the organization. So one of the things that I would say is that take the phone call, have the meeting, continue to churn the business that you're trying to make prosperous. Lean into those relationships for some of those answers that you may not have the initial answer or plan for. I think we at Butler Tech really relied upon our connections to learn about what others were doing and how to help each other during that time. I would also say be ready for the plan within the plan. Heading down a trajectory, you think that this is the ideal plan, and then something else is presented to you that was unexpected. But be ready to make that shift and adapt. And then lastly, what I would say is, in a sea full of red, look for that blue part of the ocean. Find that niche that works for the customer. Focus on doing that better than anyone else. And I think that your business can survive when you practice some of these items.
Very good. Monica.
Okay. I would emphasize the extent that the crises impacts different people differently, and we can't assume it's all the same. Businesses are great at looking at market segments. So we've looked at segments of students, and we know, for example, that students of color have been impacted more by COVID and then more in the educational system. There's actually a report that came out of an organization called Strata that said 1/3, and I'm looking down so I can get this right for you, 1 out of 3 working age Americans had to change or cancel their plans for education because of COVID. Now, within that, people of color, the African American especially, and the Hispanic population was even more likely to change or cancel their plans for education. So how do we address that is absolutely important. And we looked at it pretty systematically at our institution, whether it was about technology, whether it was about food insecurity or other needs or other opportunities that we didn't think about. So to me, it's look at those populations and how we can address all those needs.
Thank you, Monica. I think that's an important message. Matt.
I think the best way I could answer this is sort of how we tried to, evolve and adapt and change when this was happening. If you remember when COVID first hit, it hit the West Coast first. And so in my domain, so to speak, Washington State was one of those states that had to deal with this. And so when it was coming to Ohio, and you could feel it coming, and right before DeWine made the shutdown announcement, I called a couple of my superintendent friends out in Washington State, and I said, all right, what don't I know yet, which is a lot, and what do I need to prepare for, and what should we be thinking about? And one of my colleagues out there said, you need to think about when you're going to shut down, how you're going to feed your kids, and then education would be second. So I guess my advice would be network. What should I be doing? Who's ahead of me in that regard? And what do I need to be thinking about that maybe somebody else has already gone through? And that I can learn from. I think the other thing that I saw a lot of businesses in Liberty Township and Westchester do during shutdown too is the networking component and sort of advertising for each other via social media or different events to sort of help maybe those mom and pop restaurants in need. I just love seeing that. So not really advice, but I like seeing more of the collaborative spirit in our community.
Yeah, it sounds like from all of you that you took great advantage of talking with peers in your respective areas. And for business, your peer yesterday or in March of last year might have been more of a competitor, and now your peer may be that competitor, but now we are working to survive all together. So great. Let's go back more to the education focus, because everything that, well, not everything, but a lot of things that were apparent to the general population is that we were working on a daily basis of trying to figure out what's going to happen next hour, maybe tomorrow, but trying to look farther ahead and understanding what the long-term impact of this has not been really seen a lot in media and discussions and so on. And my concern is for our students, because, with all due respect to technology, but to Matt's point about being together and having that social interaction and having exchange of ideas in sometimes a very casual way, but some of the greatest ideas in the world have come from a coffee shop. And a lot of that has been missing. So my question is, what do you think the long-term impacts on your respective student populations are going to be? And so now we're talking anywhere from our kindergartens and, how we're planning for when they graduate, all the way up to our current adult learners, and maybe especially our endangered, the at-risk populations, Monica, that you were just talking about. So let's talk about that. Kathy, go ahead.
Yeah, I mean, I would start by echoing what Monica Posey just outlined, and that this is not hitting us all equally. We had 400 students that were there in the fall and did not return in the spring. And we called every one of those 400 students, because we want them to stay in school. We know that if they drop out of school, it's less likely that they'll come back. We called every one of them, and the reasons they couldn't come back is that mom and dad have lost their job and they need to make money for the house, or their little brothers and little sisters were home and they needed to watch them while mom or dad went to work. So my biggest concern about this pandemic is exactly what Dr. Posey brought up, and that is that stays with you. If you can't go to school now, it's going to be harder to return. And we are seeing it, and everybody is seeing that minorities and lower socioeconomic students of less not ability, but resources are less able to go to school. And that's going to have long-term implications for us as a society. It's something I'm really worried about. And I think both Cincinnati State and Miami Regionals, we're there for any student. So it's not just the student that gets a 4.0 and has the resources, that we're there for any student. And I'm really worried about those students.
John?
Yes, so I believe that access and equity continues to be an issue in our education systems. And I think that it was highlighted even more during the pandemic. I think we recognized that, students had different situations to deal with. Some had to add hours to their work schedule. Others did, as Kathy mentioned, had to care for their siblings. And sometimes some of the resources of the laptops that were Butler Tech laptops, or whether they were through Miami or Cincinnati State or Lakota, may have been the only access to the curriculum or to whatever it was that was happening in the content delivery. So broadband for all, I think, is an initiative that Butler Tech is taking on right now, because we see it as an access and equity issue. But from a long-term perspective, I also did see that we saw an increase actually in our adult education enrollment. And I think that was a result that people had a little bit of time to reflect and say, what's my next direction? And then I think making sure that we target programs to meet those kind of future-proof jobs is the direction that we need to head. But access and equity became a key component that I think that we need to address educationally and in society in general.
Okay.
Yeah, good.
Monica?
Yes, I agree with all of those things. I think certainly there's a slowdown for many individuals, and the work to pull them in and keep them on their educational track is so important, and it's a struggle. It could be a year, it could be 2 years for some, but I see some good things happening. We're always concerned at Cincinnati State about the for-profit colleges, and many of those have been more advanced in terms of technology, in terms of bringing students in and some of their recruiting methods. Well, we've improved in new ways, and we had to do it fast. I mean, the technology we have, our balance between online and classroom instruction is greater. We had to look at, because of COVID, every system, every service, and how to make it better, whether it was the application process, our counseling, our advising, our bursar process. So we've improved our processes in new ways. And I think in the future, people will be able to advance more because we as institutions are better. It's just going to take a little while, and it's going to take a lot more outreach on our part.
Okay. Matt.
I think probably the long-term impacts that I'm worried about would be for some districts, not just in this region or Ohio, but across the country, is where are the kids at? If you're on remote, you're almost going remote for a year. There's a huge concern I have about those kids and what they're doing and things. They're not connected to school. Most of them are, but there's still some districts that have thousands of kids that they have no idea where they're at or what they've been doing. So I think that's a concern. Obviously, I would have concerns about the learning gaps, and it really doesn't matter if you're even in person now or hybrid or remote. There's going to be, in the K-12 setting, there are going to be learning gaps that we're going to have to address. It's kind of like when we come out of this, what's the comeback look like? And that's not going to happen in a month or even a year for some of our kids. So we have to talk about what are the strategies that we're going to do to make those achievement gaps smaller than what they are right now. So for some of our kids, that's pretty wide. And then there's the social emotional impact of not being connected to school or seeing people that our kids are going through and have been suffering. So there's a huge social emotional learning component to all of this. We do a lot with Mindpiece and some other organizations in the districts that help our kids. But I'm worried a little bit about the long-term effects and what Lakota and other schools and higher ed institutions can do for that piece. I think that's going to be huge as well. So, and I guess too, the other thing would be, I think there's going to be huge reading gaps in some of our youngest students in terms of if they were in a remote or hybrid setting, and even in person, it's just not the same as what it's like, what it was like a year from a year ago, I guess.
Yeah, and if I could just interject, as a business person and a grandparent, I have a concern about all these students at whatever level they are matriculating up to the next level and being qualified, for the next grade, for the next school experience, and eventually into a workforce. So I think that's something as a society that we're all going to have to address very seriously. And I wanted to ask you, Matt, in particular, about how I know this has affected state testing, which of course is part of the grade that school systems get. Where are we on that?
I was not a huge proponent of unrealistic testing to begin with, and certainly in the midst of a pandemic, my thoughts on that haven't changed at all, Rick. I do think that we need to be accountable. We need to be measuring kids even in the midst of a pandemic, but things aren't normal, and I hate saying that, and we say that so much right now during COVID. I just don't think our kids need another stressor on their life right now when we have the experts in our classrooms that can adequately monitor progress and see where our kids are achieving at now. I think we probably need a break. I know there's some recent legislation that even came out yesterday about the state not doing some things that weren't federally mandated. So I know there's still some discussions about that. We have a new Department of Education secretary, so we'll see what happens. I know that there's conversations taking place, but I just think we need to try to get back to the basics right now and worry more about the high stakes testing once we come out of this.
Okay. I don't want to exclude the other three here in the higher education arena. Is there any of that affects you folks directly?
I'll just mention something related is that we've moved towards multiple measures. So at one time we just used AccuPlacer, which is a placement testing system as students transition from high school to higher ed. And it just was not accurate, and then it just doesn't really address issues around equity and opportunity. So we've used multiple measures, and we think it's really important at all levels to look at the different ways that students learn and the different ways we assess what they're ready for. And this has helped. And what we do is, we look at the high school courses they took, not just the high school GPA. We have the advisors have conversations with the students about what they feel they're ready for. We look at other types of experiences that they have that might help them prepare for classroom instruction. And that tells us whether they're ready for English Comp 1 or 2, or they need some additional remediation. So just the idea of looking more holistically at how we assess learning, I think, is very important, and it's more important now than ever.
Rick, I just wanted to add the irony that I'm seeing right now is that we talked 10 minutes about the uniqueness of every student and every situation that they're facing, yet we're going to batch all of these students according to chronological age, and we're going to identify whether a district is a success or a failure based upon the batching of those students to take the test all at the same time. It just doesn't make sense. It's either an assessment of learning or it's an assessment for learning. And I think districts and district leaders see it as an assessment for learning, how we can better educate the students. And it shouldn't be an all-encompassing valuation of a school district or an organization such as Butler Tech or a university.
Now, I would just add that higher education institutions as a whole are moving away from ACT and SAT, and COVID really accelerated that. So pre-COVID, Miami was requiring ACT and SATs, and this year we are not. And I for one, am very supportive of that.
Okay. I will tell you all that my wife, the teacher, would agree with you all. Let's talk. There's a question that came up from our people in the meeting here today at the tables, and this is somewhat related, and it's regarding the mental health of our student populations. So could you speak to what schools have done and what the community could do to continue to support the mental health of kids? So we're talking school and community, and I would imagine this might even extend to the families themselves and maybe giving them hints about what to do.
Well, I would start just by saying, in addition to mental health of kids, mental health of the faculty and the staff, all of our employees. Yes. This is the time, if you think about it, when is everybody in this whole world has been impacted at the same time by COVID. And when have we had a situation like that where everyone is kind of suffering at some level? So we I take it from the world to all the way down to regionals real quick. We've done some extra programming. We as a regional system have done extra programming related to mental health. Miami as a system has added extra resources for employees, including counseling, whether it be financial counseling, Rick, or whether it be psychological counseling. In addition to that, we have asked our faculty to be very sensitive to students and student needs. We've seen more flexibility, frankly, than ever before with students and what they need at a certain time. We have added some counselors during the situation. So, but I think it's a really great question because it's really important to what's happening right now. I think we've all read the data. It's alarming.
Yeah. John?
Well, we launched our 5th-day experiences in spite of going through the pandemic, which provides students some voice and some choice for their learning. And as we've been on the now and providing students their lab time twice a week, Fridays became an opportunity really to gain connections and provide an opportunity for our partnership with Lifespan and our counselors that are on our campuses to really provide students opportunity to have additional voice about, what were some of their struggles that they were having during the pandemic. And and really that feeling of isolation sometimes that maybe all of us had experienced during the pandemic. And so providing them some opportunities to connect with one another and have a voice for what was happening in their world, I think is really, really key, especially when they're on this journey. And we, for the most part on our campuses, we have sophomores, juniors, and seniors, and they're trying to figure out, what the next step is for them. There's a lot of anxiety that goes on regardless of a pandemic. And so just providing them that voice and time to be able to share with one another through the connecting with their students, their fellow students, and their teaching staff, I think has been very, very helpful. Probably something we will continue beyond the pandemic, because we saw a lot of connectedness and community that was as a result of these meetings with students.
Yeah, good.
Go ahead, Monica.
Yeah, about maybe 4 or 5 months ago, a group of college students from across Ohio met with the governor. And the idea was for the governor to hear the concerns of the students. And we weren't sure what they were going to say. All of the colleges sent reps. And the main focus of that conversation, their concern expressed, was student mental health. And the result was that there was some additional funding to support colleges to do more. And we've taken it on as one of our major initiatives. And for us, it meant, one, putting more dollars behind counselors so that we have the resources virtually right now, but also on campus if someone needs help. And we had to expand our partnerships. We work with Mental Health of America. We work with organizations such as Albert House and other organizations, because we can't do it all. But it's now elevated from maybe lower on the list of things to concentrate to most high. And we're seeing it. We're seeing some positive results. But again, this is going to be a long-term, challenge for us, but we're very aware of it.
Thank you. Matt.
I kind of addressed it a little bit before in my other response, Rick. I just think it goes back to what we've been doing for our families. Now the COVID crisis adds a whole new wrinkle into it. And I've seen more, and you alluded to it just a few minutes ago, Rick, but I've seen more family-based services in terms of mental health challenges. Sometimes it's not the student. A lot of times it's not. It might be mom or dad that are struggling. And so we have champions and liaisons in our buildings and Mindpiece that are reaching out to our families and to our kids. We've seen certainly an uptick in the number of cases of mental health supports that are needed for our students. And quite honestly, I don't think we all have all the answers yet in terms of what this is going to look like and what the long-term impact is doing. But those are some of the things that we're working on now in our district, I'm sure in the other institutions as well, behind the scenes in terms of what are we really going to need coming out of this. And Kathy mentioned it too. It's not just about students. It's also about our staff. And they're suffering right along with the kids in a lot of regards.
Yes. Now, Matt, let me ask you, it's my understanding that there's a therapy dog program in Lakota.
That's one of our great programs as well. We just have our 7th therapy dog now in the district. I want 23, one in every building. They're really good. They're trained. They're from a group called Circle Tail, which is like on the east side of Cincinnati. And these dogs are specifically trained to deal with people that are having some issues, whether it's mental health or just stress relief. Works great for students and for staff, quite frankly, and for other people too. And our staff members are the ones that take the dogs home and have them at schools, and they kind of rotate through, or in a lot of cases they are housed at a specific building. But it just brings the whole stress down, and we've seen them work with kids and with families. And I can't say enough about the program. I have one with me that I take to different meetings, and we have other schools now that are interested. Monroe is getting one. Milford reached out to me last week. And so I can't say enough about Circle Tail and the organization and what I've seen those dogs do for our students and for our families.
Yeah.
That's wonderful. I have a therapy cat at my house.
No such thing, Rick.
Let's move on to the subject of workforce development. And just as a time check, we've got about 8 more minutes before we definitely want to stop and take some questions. So we're going to try to move along here. One of the stats that we know in Lakota, and this is primarily a Lakota stat, but 70% of our population in Lakota do not have students enrolled. And I'm sure there are percentages that you can track in your respective or overall communities for our other institutions here. But can you explain the importance of our education institutions to our community and to our work community? Kathy,
sure. And in my answer, I want to highlight two things I was hoping to highlight somewhere in this session. I think many of us in higher education, especially, I know John and Monica as well. We all have things not just for the traditional age student. So there's a lot, and that all those people need education as well. One of the things that Miami University has recently started is we've started a micro-credential program, and that's a series of small sets of classes, like 3 classes, and then 3, maybe 4 classes. They're packaged together, and they're packaged together with the businesses. So it's driven by the business. An example of one that we've just put together is one for the city of Hamilton. They wanted a customer service micro-credential. So we worked with them, we developed a customer service micro-credential, and now we have people in the city and in their small businesses and part of Spooky Nook that are all signing up for that micro-credential. So we design it with the business. That's one thing I want to highlight. And the other thing, if you have not heard about, we have a program that we just launched, Work Plus, and we launched it right before the pandemic. It was growing exponentially. And Work Plus is a program where the students work in a business. That's their first job. Their first job is to work in a business or in a manufacturing organization. They work for 24 hours a week. They get paid for 24 hours a week, but then the student is able to go to school for free at Miami regional campuses. So the student graduates completely debt-free. The employer has a student who's committed to them for 4 years. They're a student 24 hours, so typically they're not paying benefits. And we've had this we were growing it. COVID has paused it, but we're still growing it. It's become a statewide initiative now, and Miami Regionals is the first to get this started. It's been very successful with our businesses, and it's been really successful with our students. So since this is a chamber event, if there are any businesses there that are interested in learning more about Work Plus, I'd really encourage you to reach out to me or the micro-credential program.
Thank you, Kathy. Hey, John.
So credentialing is really kind of Butler Tech's wheelhouse. I know that, we have a number of students, whether they're doing an 11-month program in adult education or a 2-week program in order to obtain a credential, getting them into the workforce quickly. And even our high school students with over 200 satellite programs that we have in our 11 associate school districts. So credentialing and getting students to become employees out into the workforce is really important. But I want you to think from a taxpayer standpoint about the next couple of things I'm going to share with you. The skills gap is going to probably leave about 2.4 million manufacturing jobs unfilled between 2018 and 2028. 89% of manufacturers face talent shortages, with 60% of them reporting a very high impact on productivity. And then 17.2 million workers employed in infrastructure jobs are nearing retirement. You take all of that combinations together and you think from a taxpayer standpoint, whether it's income taxes or property taxes, people need to have sustainable employment. And with this influx of retirements that are happening, and whether it's manufacturing or healthcare, which, by the way, I believe that there will be almost 30 million good jobs available without a bachelor's degree found in skilled trades, healthcare, or hospitality. So this is really an influx of a new tax base to be able to have all of the functions of a community, but we've got to make sure that all of those students become employers or employees, either one of those, and taxpayers. And I think that's the importance of these education institutes that are on this panel today.
Monica.
I would just like to add that We provide all types of short and long-term certifications as well as our traditional programs, but there's more financial support available than ever before. So at Cincinnati State, we have our short-term certificate grant for individuals because typically federal financial aid might not apply, but there are grant dollars. We also are implementing Ohio Tech Cred, which is a program sponsored by the state in which employers identify the particular skills needs. They look at a long list on the Ohio Gov website of potential credentials that would meet those needs and then partner with the institution. So we're one of those partner institutions. And the advantage is, as the employer identifies the skills, the employees and the partner, then they do receive $2,000 per person for the training. So we're really pushing that right now. You can check our website or Ohio Gov website to make sure as an employer, you're taking advantage of all the financial opportunities to help move us forward.
Well,
Matt.
I like the quote that I hear often from Joe Henson. So goes Westchester Liberty Township, so goes Lakota, and vice versa. I'm not sure what order I'd put that in, but Joe says that a lot. And I think you could say the same about Cincinnati State and Miami and certainly Butler Tech as well. I think, too, you need to think about it in terms of we want this to be a thriving community, and part of a thriving community is a really good school district. And so I would put Lakota up there at the top of that list with other public schools, certainly in the area. But when you're talking about recruiting businesses or new developments and housing and things like that, one of the things that people are going to look at are what are the higher ed institutions and what do the K-12 public schools look like? I mean, that's one of the things that makes our area attractive to businesses and to their employees. So I cannot say that enough. And also, obviously, property values and retaining and creating jobs. So we are in a really good spot here in Westchester and Liberty Township. And I think sometimes we forget about that or we don't maximize it enough when we're talking about schools and businesses and other partnerships.
Okay, so we're right at time here, and I want to make sure I give each of you about a minute to say anything else you want to say about your respective institutions, even maybe giving out some websites. But I want to do a real quick quiz because there are a couple of subjects we didn't quite touch on, and we're going to do this by a show of hands. I'm just doing this on the fly here, so good luck to me. How many of you have internship programs? Just raise a hand.
We do, yeah.
And now keep the hand up. Now, with the other hand, how many think it's important to our community? Okay. And one thing I want, put up hands, feet, everything. I'd like to say that in a lot of the answers we just heard, we talk about certification and degrees that are available and reaching down into the community, down in, from secondary down into the primary. But we know there are certification programs. John, you were talking about the stats about jobs that are going to be available don't require a bachelor's. And I know Lakota is working in cybersecurity and helping certify people. And I mean, think about this. A young person gets to graduate from high school with a certification that will give them a job that's going to be a well-paying job, which then they can continue pursuing their secondary education with our other institutions. And as a financial advisor, one of the biggest things we have to deal with is student debt, not only for the individuals, but also for the families. I've had to tell families you cannot retire because of your student debt load. So I'm really happy to see that. And I would love to help people understand more about how not to put themselves under that heavy grindstone. So let's go around a minute or less. Go, Kathy.
So I think when you look at our history, and especially the history of education, really good things happen from major struggles. I've been quoting, and I've been talking to my own faculty and staff. I've been quoting Martin Luther King because he says it so much better than I can. And I want to read this quote. We are confronted with the fierce urgency of now. In this unfolding conundrum of life and history, there is such a thing as being too late. This is the time for vigorous and positive action. So I've been using that with my own faculty and staff because it says so much, right? We're in the middle of history here, but we have opportunities now. We as an educational system, as a Westchester community, we have opportunities that now is the time to jump on. So it's what I've said every time I've talked with my faculty and staff, and so I have to part with those words.
Thank you, Kathy. John.
Yeah, so I want to thank you, Rick, and the Westchester Liberty Chamber for providing us the opportunity. Thanks to the panelists. I appreciate and applaud all of what you're doing for your organizations. I want to draw attention to Butler Tech's new website at www.butlertech.org, where we just completed a documentary that just happened to be during the 2019-20 school year titled The Education Revolution. It follows 4 students. And what you'll see is the resiliency and the passion and the grit and tenacity for students to overcome any obstacles during this pandemic time. So if you are in need of encouragement to think about what this next generation of students are going to do for this world, I encourage you to go to the website, click on the Education Revolution tab, watch the documentary, and be inspired, as I know our staff are each and every day that we get to work with our students.
Thank you, John. Before we go on, I'm going to suggest to our panelists that in the chat portion, why don't you type in your respective websites so people can actually see that copied if they need it, okay?
All right.
Monica.
Well, just continuing those thoughts, we know that there's a quote that says, education is the most powerful weapon that changed the world. I think what we provide here as a group is absolutely essential to this recovery. And I just want to emphasize our partnerships, whether it's Lakota, Butler Tech, what we do with College Credit Plus, and other ways we work together, working with Miami and transfer opportunities. That's essential to the future. And I'm just thankful that we're part of a team that's looking to the future and looking how we can work together and we can make a difference. Thank you.
Thank you, Monica. Matt.
Thanks, Rick. I think it's just important for me to say that our kids have really been successful this year in the midst of a pandemic, and that doesn't happen without our parents and our community and certainly our teachers and staff working together to get them through this. And as someone on the panel mentioned earlier, we've all been, I think it was Kathy, we've all been through this. So we're all going through this at the same time. I think we need to remember to give ourselves some grace coming out of this, because when we pull out of this, we get this past us, it's going to take a long time. It's going to take still the networking and the collaborative minds getting together and trying to forge how do we reach these gaps what we need to do to take care of our kids and for our staff members. So it's going to take some time. We're going to be in sort of a different mode for many months to come,
I think that's true. Well, again, I'd like to thank all of you for participating in this. I will tell you that I'm going to encourage everyone in our meeting today, go hug a teacher, go hug an administrator, go hug a student. Ask
for permission first.
Ask permission first, unless it's your own, and then it's your own thing.
That's correct.
But it's again, the experience that I see every day through the eyes of my wife, including teaching phys ed classes from our living room, which is really interesting to watch. It's very stressful on all of them, and they can use all our support. So with that, thank you again. Now, next month, one last thing. Everyone pay attention to the chat. The websites are over there. Stick around because you can chat more there and you'll be able to chat at the tables. But before you leave us, next month, we are going to have, as a reminder, our annual celebration on Tuesday, March 9th. It will be a virtual. There you will see the brand new annual celebration video celebrating our members and 45 years of the Westchester Liberty Chamber Alliance, which is just amazing. Now, please continue networking. This remote meeting will stay on until about 1:30. Make connections, make promises to connect with other people. And thanks again. See you next month for our annual celebration. Thank you, everybody.
I want to thank all
Thank
five
you.
of you for taking, on behalf of the chamber and all of our attendees, for taking time out of your busy schedules to do this for us. It was definitely inspirational, and I can't tell you how fortunate we feel to live and work in an area where the education is the best of the best. So thank you again, and I hope all of you have a great day.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye.
All right.